Welcome, everyone. My name is Tina Burnside, and I'm the co-founder and curator at the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. And we thank you for attending tonight's Artist Talk. We're going to talk to Kehayr Brown-Ransaw about his exhibit that's now on display at the museum called To Have Never Known. And he's going to be in conversation with Rekhet Si-Asar. And I'll introduce both of them, and then afterwards, I will turn off my mic, and then they'll start the discussion. And also, we at the end are going to save some time. And so, if you have any questions, please put your questions either in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A, and then we'll leave some time at the end to go over questions. So, Kehayr is a textile artist, educator, and curator. He is an artist in residence at the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery, where his exhibit To Have Never Known is on display now through June. And Rekhet is the executive director of In Black Ink, located in St. Paul, which is a nonprofit publishing organization that creates spaces where the stories and voices of people of African heritage are celebrated, documented, and achieved through publication, professional development, training opportunities, and public presentations. And then also we do have some of Kehayr's work that we're going to be showing, so they can also talk about the various works that are on display at the museum. And then you'll learn also more about his background and his work and his future plans. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kehayr and Rekhet.
And I want to say thank you, Tina, and thank you to the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. I so appreciate this space being in our community and accessing people like Kehayr and other artists to highlight and elevate. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm sure you are too, because I met Kehayr about a few weeks ago now and was able to see his exhibit at the museum. So to start, I want to just jump right in, if that's okay with you, Kehayr, because there's lots of questions and I'm sure folks will have some that they would like as well, because your exhibit is so unique. But I wanted to start with, are you able to share with us, like, tell us a little about your early upbringing, your background, what sparked your interest, and what led to the creative work that you are doing currently?
Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I just have always been encouraged to kind of explore creative outlets, I guess, in terms of art making. My mother was a photographer, and like that, being in art spaces was a pretty common thing for me. There was never not a time where I wasn't exposed to art or making something. And in terms of like textile and fiber work, I learned to sew in 6th grade, and then started crocheting and knitting as like a hobby after that. But I've just kind of always, I guess I don't know what else to say.
Was art the main thing that pulls your attention when you say you grew up in an artistic kind of family? I mean, with the exposure, were there other subject areas that you explored, or was art your thing?
Art was my main thing. I guess my mother had like a really, in terms of like school and education, my mother had like a really huge emphasis on history, and Black history, and knowing like our familial history. And so she would rent like she would rent like pretty much every PBS video from the library, and like we would watch them at home. And I just remember like having way more education in terms of Black history than what was taught in schools,
Mhm.
almost to a point that it became a problem in school, because I was also encouraged to like talk, and it's something that I enjoyed doing, and kind of asking questions and challenging things. And when the information was incorrect, I would challenge it. And that did, I remember for one class that did become a point of contention between my teacher and I, because our books, our textbooks were just actually just incorrect. So
Mm. And you was able to
yeah.
pull out the incorrect portions of the book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, art and history have always just kind of been like super big to me, in terms of what I was doing. I don't know. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Now, you mentioned you grew up in Milwaukee. Now,
Hmm.
did you go to elementary, middle, high school there? Or
Yeah.
like regular public school or artistic schools? What was your I mean, what was some of the training or the background that you received?
Yeah. So I started. Milwaukee has like a really. Um, I started at Creative Arts, um, which is like a. I'm not familiar with too many cities that have like elementary schools that are like devoted to arts education as like a um, primary way to teach.
Mhm.
Um, but I went there, and my mom eventually um, transferred me to the Umbrook School District just because they invested more money into the students, and I was in the gifted and talented program um, in the Umbrook School District. So um, I went through elementary, middle, and freshman year of high school there, and then transferred to Wauwatosa East, where I finished out my schooling, and then I moved here. So
Wow. So you moved here. When you moved here, did you move here for school or was it primarily uh, just a family move? Like, what was your
I,
migration story here?
yeah, I moved here for college. I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, you know, Kier, I find just your background and stuff is really interesting. Were they things that like piqued your attention or helped you really kind of steer towards the love of, you mentioned you started sewing at I think sixth grade or
Sixth grade. Yeah.
yeah, sixth grade. And then you mentioned you was really into fiber and textile
Hmm.
design. Like it sounds like a lot of that happened early. Was it at
Yeah.
home primarily, or was that an interest of yours? How did that come about?
Yeah. When you're little and they ask you like what you want to be when you grow up, I think my two answers were always that or I guess three answers were always that um, I wanted to be a dad, a teacher, or a vet. Um, and I like when I found out that in order to be a vet, you had to like put down animals, I was just like, I'm not doing that. Um,
That
and
was tough.
so um, I really got into this, and this is a thing that like I think just kind of runs in my family is just I wouldn't say being just like really domestic, but like just really wanting to take care of, or just like getting a lot of joy out of caring for other people and making other people feel cared for. Um, and so I yeah, I just like, I wanted to learn how to do like things that I thought were important to like be able to take care of yourself. And one of those things was I learned how to like cook and sew really early. Um, yeah.
Okay. Now, at what point did you start marrying these things together in your art, like the sewing and the fiber and textile pieces? When did you start kind of creating art out of that process?
It wasn't actually until my sophomore year of college. I was a furniture major at MCAD, and um, I just kind of felt like I was being pushed in a direction that didn't feel authentic to me and what I wanted to do. I definitely like approached furniture from a more like fine art aspect in terms of like wanting to not just make pieces of furniture. And I think everyone in my class was also doing the same thing. And so I just had a lot of encouragement to
Mhm.
figure out like what it was that I wanted to make. Um, and um, kind of, thinking about the things that I was super interested in, and fiber being one of them. And one of those places where I just felt really comfortable and really safe. Um, and it also being uh, um, something that satisfies like those that need for comfort and that safety in other people as well. It kind of became, and it also having like this historical complexity to it. I wanted to explore that more, and then I had a mentor who was a weaver, um, and so she taught me how to weave um, on a 8 harness loom, and so um, I then just kind of ran with it from there, and have
Yeah,
been doing it ever since.
I think that's the awesome thing about art. You can start with something as I don't know, furniture for me is like so fixed
Hmm.
in the artistic piece. So you can start with something as so fixed as furniture design or making, and then end up weaving and doing all of
Yeah,
the other fluid things that you've moved to. Um,
but it's so interesting because I had the same idea that like it was. I think the first piece of furniture that I made that was really successful and that I was really happy with um, was a 92-pound chair that I made for the I like I made it and finished it for um, the um, the anniversary of my grandmother's death, and she would have been 92 that year, which is why it weighed 92 pounds. But
mm,
like from that project, I realized like just how bodily furniture is,
mm,
even in its like very hard form,
mm,
because ultimately it does. I mean, at least like chairs and sofas and things that like you sit on and interact with have to be able to like hold you. Um, and then even going a step further with like even the way that we decide to purchase certain things, the way that the upholstery feels on our skin is like so important.
mm. Well, you know, I have so many, there's so many directions that I feel like I could go, but I really want to, you
Yeah.
know, have you do the talking because I'm really super geeked about fabric and
Hmm.
textile, having sewn like all of my life. My mom was a seamstress um, and sewed everything, including our underwear sometimes, you know, and
Hmm.
so I grew up being like one of the only one in the family that sewed. So I really appreciate, like your love of fabric and its flexibility and its malleability there. I wanted to ask a little. Now you mentioned research a couple of times in terms of, and it sounds like, I guess for all of the pieces that you create, there is a body of research that goes with it. Even like as you spoke of the chair made for your grandmother, it was 92 pounds, equal to the number of years she was going to be. Do you consider yourself more of an artist? And I know it sounds like a yeah, duh type of question, but do you consider yourself more of an artist, or like do you find yourself kind of sometimes really enjoying the research process of getting to the, how you manifest the art? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think that I'm thinking about so many and sometimes too many things um, when I'm making something, that the research helps me focus
Mm-hmm.
what it is that I'm doing. I think it also helps me um, like, I mean, my favorite reason for doing anything is because I want to,
Mm-hmm.
but I think having like an actual knowing that there's a reason beyond just one of the things and one of the ways that I really like to work is by instinct.
Mm-hmm.
I like to just kind of sit with my work and think about how it's responding to whatever it is that I'm doing. um, I think that my work I mean, I don't think it sounds weird, but some people might. But I think my work is alive, and I think that it is in kind of like imbued with just with this natural spirit of um, just kind of existing in the world. And so I want to be able to respond to it um, as much as I need it to respond to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can't do that if I'm not listening to it. And so sometimes I just have to kind of let things happen naturally. And so, like, while this kind of natural instinct is just kind of a thing, I think that the whole, like, oh, the natural, like, artistic genius is kind of, I think it's been played up in this way where it's like, it's not real. It's just like kind of, it's just paying attention. And there is like, we exist now. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's context and there are some like 4,000 years of art history that can be researched that will explain why it is that I think that certain um, things should be done in the way that they need to be done, whether they're cultural or just like historical practices or whatever. So
Wow. I love the way you explain that your art is alive and you have
mhm,
to interact with it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's beautiful. Um, I was thinking that this exhibit that you have at the museum that will be there until June. Um, I think I was blown away by even the concept of coming up with a way to mark such a tragic experience in our historical, it's not even a historical legacy, but just in our history, the path of our history. Um, can you talk a little about, tell us about the exhibit. Tell us
Mhm.
about how it came about, what kind of led you to the path of saying, you know what, this is how I'm going to manifest it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so for anyone that's seen it or isn't able to see it, um, to have never known is an exhibition of quilts, which Tina, if you want to share those, share the images now, that would be a good time. Um, but it's it's 9 like baby quilts that I made that are meant to be representative of 44,000 children that were abducted and sold into slavery between 18 or hold on, let me check my notes here actually. Within the last 60 years after the transatlantic slave trade had been made illegal. And basically it's kind of this like it's thing of it's I don't know, for me it's there's no way to like actually understand that number. There is a research institution that has been working on this project for years now, and they've made all this information public, and it they so basically these ships that travel across the Atlantic, abducting these people, these Black free persons, and condemning them to a life of just like terror. Like I don't know. There's really no way to there. The research of it is they're just kind of making the names of the people public, and they're making the data accessible, but when you're looking at it, also the I just wanted to share the research is hosted by Rice University. The website is publicly available. It's slavevoyages.org. But like when you're looking at it and you're responding to this information, you're having an emotional reaction to it, and there isn't like a way to have emotions in research. And because it has to, I don't know, for whatever reason, research has to be like objective. And so that was kind of, I was just like, I was having such a hard time dealing with what it is that I was reading. And the reading through the slave registers, I didn't know how to respond to it. And in the United States, there's a tradition of swaddling children in quilts, and then also of quilts being used by enslaved women to gain access into white society, and like using coverlets to like made as gifts for their mistresses in order to like buy their way into the house or buy safety for their families, or people using whatever skills they had as currency in order to make their lives a little easier. But you come into the world, you're immediately swaddled in cloth, and then you leave the world, you're also swaddled in that cloth, and for so many babies, it was oftentimes the same piece of fabric, and so it to come and leave in the same piece. I just so I just wanted to sit with that, and because sewing is such a meditative thing. You do it for hours. You just can kind of tune out and just listen to the um, yeah, making those quilts. I watched so many seasons of Grey's Anatomy, um, but being able to tune the rest of the world out and not hear or focus on anything was really good for
Yeah.
that.
I have two requests. I have a request that I saw go through the chat for you to describe some of the pieces.
Mhm.
Um, like maybe the colors of the squares or the shapes that are used in your quilt, just for people who cannot see it so they can
Yeah,
visualize it. So if you can do that, and I'll ask if Tina can go through a couple of them. I don't know if you want to just do one at a time.
for
Um,
sure. So
However you would like to do that.
so the first one, the one that's up currently, is kind of um, is kind of my take on this, like migration patterns of birds, and the way that they flock, and just kind of thinking about the way that people move in general, and how at this time and then after and then even 100 years later, migration uh, for really anyone, it has just been so, um, for any subjugated person, it's just so important, to find safety. And it's like, to what end, do we stop migrating, and do we stop, do we ever find that and feel that safety and that home? um I don't know. Yeah. It's
Yeah. So this piece is yellow, and is that a wine, deep wine, and
mhm.
dark green, and then
Yeah,
the base is gray.
yeah,
And do the colors mean anything? Um, yeah, do they mean anything, or are they supposed to mean anything to you? I see the pattern that you talked about, that
yeah. I mean,
almost a V shape.
the colors, not the color, they're colors that I work with.
Mhm.
I really like working with, I mean, they're pretty standard colors: red, yellow, black, and green, the colors of the Pan African flag. Um,
Mhm.
and they're just kind of, they're, I think the way that those colors exist and what they represent, for anyone who doesn't know, the red is, representative of blood, for ancestors that we've lost. Green is for the wealth, and the land of Africa. Black is representative of all Black people, and the diaspora as a whole. And yellow, is I think the yellow is actually being really contested, but I believe that the yellow is just like, just is more like representative of just kind of like a future, for Black people. Um,
Yeah. I know in some places they say the sun,
yeah.
but at the same time, yeah, that does speak to the future. But I like, it's not immediately obvious that those are the red, black, and green, because you play with the shades. Um,
Hmm.
like the red is really deep to where it almost looks like that wine color.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's really that's really beautiful. I think, okay, you said your work, you talked a little about how our people used the creating of quilts, um, to almost uh, buy themselves into the existing societies, white societies.
Hmm.
Um, Can you talk a little more about that? I love how you talked about, just even
Yeah.
quilts being used at birth and then at death again. But can you tie that together and tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, just it was really common practice for there wasn't a ton of, I mean, enslaved people did not have a ton of downtime, um, and in that downtime, really, in order to survive, like people would do whatever it is that they could to um, make their lives easier, and oftentimes it meant either trying to hone a skill, identifying a skill in their children, um, developing, um, and then trying to like make sure that they learn that and like develop it to make sure that they can, and using it as like a way to kind of better their own lives. And so um, on plantations, a lot of um, there would be um, sometimes there would be women who would weave and that would like mend things for the house, and they would just like, kind of make little quilts and little doilies and whatever for um, the mistresses as gifts. Um, and one of among these things were quilts and coverlets for beds. Um, yeah, and just kind of like use that to be like, oh, I can do this thing, and um, any way to find place in not the fields. um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, and I think I kind of, you alluded to this a little, and I might have asked part of this question, but I just wanted to hear a little more. You talked about, okay, your work crosses over a number of areas like history, sociology, culture, art.
Mhm.
It sounds like, there's a number of different areas that it touches on. Now, how do you select your research? Like, how do you decide, um, like even looking at this particular exhibit, um, finding the 40,000 plus children that had been abducted to base this particular exhibit on? Or are you just reading and finding about things and then it sparks some imagery in your mind or some creative juices?
um it's kind of a little of both. I came across this particular thing um because I was doing research into my own family, um and I had kind of found that my great grandmother was misidentified on the census in 1941. um like she was identified as black even though she's not black, but because of anti-miscegenation laws, like technically her marriage and like her relationship with my great grandfather and like their children would have been illegal. And so, you know, because censuses were hand taken and whoever was either giving the information, it was probably my great grandfather who identified her in that way. Um, but because of that, like discrepancy, it led me to like go back further to kind of want to see how Black people were um, kind of recorded before we were ever identified on the census, and um, kind of the way that slave registers kind of I don't know, like just kind of really did whatever they wanted to do
Mhm.
with the people's identities.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are your inspirations? Who inspire you? Like who do you look to?
Um, I don't know. It's, I guess, yeah, I don't know if there's like a real, um, if there's like a person that
Mhm.
inspires me. I guess I kind of just kind of
Or a
whatever. Yeah. Um, I was taught really young to never have heroes.
mhm.
Um, so I just like don't really, I mean, I find people really fascinating and I love what they're doing,
Mhm.
but um there are people that I follow that I love their work, but
Like name a few of those people. Whose work do you look at?
um I guess right now I'm very actually okay, so right now I'm very more concerned with um certain texts. Like
Mhm.
right now I'm reading oh, what is it? I'm reading In the Wake. Um
Mhm.
oh my gosh, who's the author of that? Um, I'm gonna look it up real quick. Um, Christina Sharp. Um, and it kind of talks about this like um, yeah, it's just it. I don't even know how to explain it. It kind of my impression is that um, like contemporary Black people don't ever get this get to live beyond slavery. We
Mhm.
don't get to live beyond um, death. I guess we're kind of always in this in the wake of um, death per se, in this kind of like
Mhm.
never-ending kind of like mourning, just because it's something that is so genetically ingrained in us. Um, and I don't know. I'm just like I'm really excited about it. I guess those are the kinds of things that I respond to. I'm really interested in the works of like Jennifer Gonzalez, who's an author. Um, and yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe I am more of a researcher because I guess the
Yeah,
things that influence
I
me
was
are,
just thinking, you know,
yeah.
sounds like you're moved by the research and the word.
Mhm.
As someone who's kind of I wouldn't consider myself a literary artist because most of my talents, I think, are visual arts. And so, but I love the connection because the ability to tell a story either with pictures, images, words. There's so many ways you can do that in the way the using of the loom to weave a particular pattern. There's so many different ways to do that. So yeah, I guess you can have many
Mhm.
inputs that actually manifest into the art that you do. But I was wondering, I mean, I think, did you have a few more images that maybe we can show and describe?
Yeah.
I know there was a couple of requests to describe the actual images. And just like if you talk about the pieces, are the number of pieces that you put together significant? What are the significant things,
Yeah.
including the colors and the shapes?
Yeah. So there are 9 total. And actually I just kind of like, I was thinking about reflecting on the whole um like exhibition and project today and over the last few weeks. Um, and Tina, can you actually show the image of the clothesline? Um, but I think, I mean, really, it's this. I think for me, it's this kind of like great story of like migration and movement. A lot of it's really important that yeah, I wanted it to be strung. I wanted the quilts to be on a clothesline, kind of in this very natural way of hanging quilts out to dry after they've been washed. And a lot of them are actually, all of them are built, all of them except for one are based on like different like geographical places. They are based on like areas where my family have lived, where my grandmother and her siblings were born, the coastline of like South Carolina, which is where a lot of the I think some of the largest plantations, the largest rice plantations were, some of the most gruesome families. Yeah, so it's kind of this, for me it's this kind of story of migration and escape and movement away from this thing, but also the celebration of life and comfort. Yeah.
Now, the one that we're looking at right now, the one that's closest on the line there, describe that one for us. Like, what is the, I know you said they all have that migration and that connection to a particular place that's also connected to your family. Like, what is the significance of this one? Including, that's one of the larger ones too, I think, in size. Both the size of it.
This is one of the largest ones. I actually don't know the measurements of any of them because none of them are square or have like any measurements. They are all just kind of cut pieces and sewn together. And yeah, this one is more referential to kind of like Midwest farm plots. The ones that are more this one and the one next to it with the white borders are more referential to kind of like this more regimented like way of breaking up land that we see in the Midwest, versus like the one that's just behind it, which there's another image of. If you could pull that up, Tina, where it's kind of like, because these places were settled kind of more recently, there was kind of more there, you see bigger plots of land, but they're all kind of in these just like these gridded patterns, whereas like on the East Coast, you don't see that as much, and like in these plantations, they're kind of really just kind of, yeah.
Well, they're all very beautiful. I know Tina's trying to move. There you go, feature a few at a time. Actually, this is one of my favorite ones. I think I told
you. Yeah, mine as well. This one is actually is a like composite map over like 50 years from where my like kind of roughly where my grandmother and her brother were born. and just kind of like these.
Can you describe the colors and the patterns of this one?
Yeah, I mean for this one, the colors are like kind of insignificant. It's more to do with like the patterning on the fabric. And so a lot of these fabrics were designed by a friend of mine. But the gold fabric that has like more variation and this kind of brownish fabric have like prints of like water, and so they're kind of just, yeah, it's the fabric is the print on the fabric was kind of more intentional in terms of like what actually is like in this place right now, and like is this more like is this more water, or is this more land, is this crop, is this housing, is this like more just kind of dead space and turned over land, which is kind of like all of this gray stuff, that is just kind of waiting there to be like something, or is it not going to be anything, actually, because it's, I don't know, maybe it's not viable anymore.
Yeah, so it's a darker gray border with the lighter gray is the gray space you're referring to, where the colors are kind of sitting on.
This darker gray is kind of the outermost darker gray is really just kind of like to frame it all, but like this lighter gray is really kind of this dead space where I couldn't quite discern what's there, because either the images were not of a higher quality, of a super high quality for me to understand, or like the land had just been turned over so many times that I just couldn't discern whether it was like live or not.
Kind of like that weathered, like when you drive across the landscape now, everything is kind of grayish. It's a beige gray.
Yeah.
But I like that there's multiple sizes going on there. Like on the, what is it, the right side, it looked like there's just a series of all the same size rectangles going down in colors. Does that mean something? Because it's away from the rest of the images on the quilt, which are the, the squares and the rectangles that's connected, but it's this part is separated from the gray. So is there any significance there?
Yeah, I mean, not really. It's kind of just like the way that the image that I was like working from, the maps kind of laid on top of each other, the way they ended up kind of working, and what I could like, the information that I could read from it, and what I decided was like important to capture from it.
Well, we are running tight on time. I mean, this has been absolutely wonderful just to hear how your mind works and how you've been able to manifest some of the research that you found so interesting. Because I think a lot of times we take the pain of our ancestors and our experiences, and we don't know what to do with it. I love that you found ways to manifest this story in something as creative as creating a quilt that, talks of the whole concept of the migration stories that's built into all of them, and the colors and the textures and the just the actual images that exist on it, the textile that exists on it. I think it's beautiful. What's next for you, Kehayr? What can we look for in the near future?
In the near future, there is a show for anyone that's in the Twin Cities. I'll have work up at the Textile Center in an exhibition that opens April 20th or April 14th, I believe. Yeah. And so, yeah, and then in mid-June sometime,
Okay.
there is another um, exhibition at SUVAC that I'll have work in that, yeah, people should. And that one I'm really excited about because that one is uh, specifically about Black abstractionism, and so it's kind of more of this. And the other artists in the exhibition are really doing some really great work.
Mm.
So people should just check that out in general.
And this is available. I mean, people can find
This
out
is a
on your website.
yeah, that one is at the Sioux Visual Arts Center. I'll type it in the I'll put if Tina wants to come back for, I'll find the information and
Sure, we could, yeah, it's about 6:53, and so we're gonna open it up to some questions. We do have some questions in the chat, so I will go through the questions, and then I have a couple of questions too. We have a couple of questions from Donna, and she asked, did you have a favorite project and color you work on? And where's your favorite time in past history that you dream of visiting if you had a time machine?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer the last question first. My favorite, the way I understand history is really in time is really, I think, not the way that other people do. And so my favorite time in history is actually the future, because I think that we don't, yeah, it's just, I could talk about that forever. But I think there's like this really complex way of trying to like reconcile and visit a past. And I think the way that we do that is like kind of this is actually by understanding and desiring for a future, if that makes sense. Which probably doesn't, but and I guess I don't know if I have a favorite project. I think they're all so like individual, that yeah, I think they're all super individual, in a way that each one is really exciting and so different from each other, that it's hard to say. But my favorite color to work with is red. It shows up in all of my work, and I really like using it.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it just like it really does something. I think, at least in terms of like dyeing fabric and pigment, red is a color that will never, it takes forever to get out of anything. It like you can't easily bleach it out of something. It's in terms of like if you look at classical Greek sculpture, it's the only color that a color paint that like still is there and visible, like all thousands of years later, you know. So
Okay, then we have another question. Oh, one person had a comment. Catherine, that's, and she says, I have never thought of a quilt like this. And now I feel like I can visualize all sorts of things in this one. And that did bring up a question that I had when you kept referring to maps. What maps were you talking about, and what maps were you working with, and how did that come out in the design of your quilt?
Like, just like if you look at like aerial maps of the landscape, and like kind of what's there, um, just kind of the rough area.
But like, what did you look at particular maps when you were designing your quilts?
I mean, I would just go into like Google Maps and just kind of look at what's there, and you can sometimes you can look at archives of old places, and it depends on like what has been photographed and what hasn't been photographed. So just accessing city archives is pretty difficult, but you can like email and be like, what does this land look like? And ask for photos.
Okay. And then I had a question. The name of the exhibit, To Have Never Known, what does that mean? Or how did you come up with that name to represent the exhibit?
Um, I don't know. It just kind of came to me. I was really struggling with like what to call it. Um, and I was thinking about it. And I was thinking about what it means to have kind of all of this information. And it is like a huge database of people who exist today's ancestors. And like, these are people that they like will never know, really. Like potentially never know of. So.
And Rekhet, what did you think about the name of the exhibit, and the exhibit when you saw it for the first time in preparing for this and talking to Kehayr?
I was really intrigued by, I love the name. For some reason, I feel like it really fits To Have Never Known, because there's so much of our history that's unknown to us. And there's so much that when you hear like just even some of the little pieces, and it's just a little piece, because he talked about the volumes of information that's in the database that you pulled that stuff out of here. But I think the little snapshots that we get of our history is things that I know I've never thought of. I've never thought about it in that fashion or any fashion. And so I think like with the struggle that's going on now in our country about not sharing certain history, I think not having our history available to others is one thing, but it's not even available to us. And so when we don't know, I feel like it's like we're partially existing. So a long answer to a very brief, quick question, but I love his exhibit. I'm intrigued by the symbolic and symbolique that's used to represent things. I love the migration patterns. It's like, as an artist, I feel like I can, even though, I mean, somebody might look at it and say, oh, it's just a bunch of squares or rectangles, but I can see from his development and how he talks about it, this, I mean, it fascinates me. It fascinates me how we take in the stories and how we're then able to share it. And I think here you've been able to share some really powerful stories in just a very short, in relative to the size of the issue, in a very short and small exhibit, but it's beautiful. So thank you for this opportunity to talk with you. And thank you, Tina.
Thank you for, yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for, yeah, I think, thank you for having the questions, and I have allowing me the space to talk about it and figure it out more cohesively. Also, and thank you everyone for being here, and listening, and taking time. And thank you to Tina for hosting me over the last year, and all of my requests.
Well, it has been a pleasure having you as an artist in residence, and seeing the work as it, you know, as it changed and as it developed, and then as it blossomed to what it is now. And so just want to thank you for your work. And also, Rekhet, thank you for the work that you do at In Black Ink. And I want to, it's a little after 7 now, 7:03. So we are going to close it out now. And I just want to thank everyone for participating. And I did put Kehayr's website address in the chat, so you can check that out and check out more about his work. And then also, please do come to the museum to see the exhibit in person if you are able to. And it is on display until June. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone, and have a good evening.